It was a dark and stormy night, and Sarah sat nervously at a dimly lit bar, waiting for her Tinder date to arrive. She had never met this guy before, but he seemed charming and funny in their messages, and she was excited to finally meet him in person. However, as the minutes ticked by and he failed to show up, Sarah began to feel uneasy. Just as she was about to give up and head home, a tall, handsome man approached her and introduced himself as Adam. He apologized for being late and explained that he had gotten stuck in traffic. Sarah was relieved and felt a little silly for being so anxious. They ordered drinks and chatted, and Sarah found herself enjoying Adam's company. He was smart, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. However, as the night wore on and they moved to a quieter corner of the bar, Sarah began to notice some red flags. Adam was extremely vague about his job, only saying that he worked in import/export. He was also very evasive when Sarah asked about his family or friends, saying that he preferred to keep his personal life private. But the biggest red flag of all came when Adam casually mentioned that he had a friend who could get him anything he wanted. Sarah laughed it off, thinking he was joking, but Adam's expression remained serious. "I'm serious," he said. "Anything. Drugs, guns, even people." Sarah's heart dropped as she realized that she was sitting across from a dangerous man. She tried to make an excuse to leave, but Adam insisted on walking her to her car. As they made their way through the deserted parking lot, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had a sinking feeling that she would never make it home. Sure enough, as soon as they reached her car, Adam grabbed her roughly by the arm and dragged her towards a waiting van. Sarah screamed and struggled, but Adam was too strong. He threw her into the back of the van and slammed the door shut. For hours, Sarah was trapped in the darkness, her mind racing with fear and panic. She had no idea what was happening or where she was going. She could hear Adam's voice in the front of the van, speaking in hushed tones to someone else. She realized with horror that he had sold her to the highest bidder on the black market. As the van finally came to a stop, Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She had no idea what would happen next. When the door opened and a group of masked men stepped inside, Sarah knew that she was in deep trouble. For days, Sarah was subjected to unspeakable horrors, kept in a dark, filthy cell and treated like an object. She was sold and resold multiple times, passed from one criminal to another like a piece of property. She lost track of time, lost track of hope. But somehow, Sarah managed to survive. She bided her time, waiting for an opportunity to escape. Finally, one night, when her captors were distracted, she managed to slip out of her cell and make a run for it. She stumbled through the dark, unfamiliar streets, her heart racing as she searched for help. It was only by sheer luck that Sarah stumbled upon a police station, where she collapsed in tears and told her story to the stunned officers. They immediately launched an investigation, but the trail had gone cold. Adam and his cohorts had vanished without a trace. Years later, Sarah still struggles with the trauma of her kidnapping. She never fully trusts anyone anymore, always watching her back and wondering if she'll ever be truly safe. And every time she swipes through Tinder, she can't help but wonder if her next date will turn into a nightmare. It was a warm summer evening, and Sarah had agreed to meet up with a guy named David, whom she had matched with on Tinder. They had been chatting for a few days, and she felt like she had a good sense of him, so she was excited to finally meet in person. David suggested they meet at a bar in the city, and Sarah agreed. When she arrived, she saw him sitting at a table in the corner of the bar, his face obscured by the dim lighting. As she approached the table, she realized he looked nothing like his photos. He was much older, balding, and significantly heavier than he had appeared in his profile pictures. Sarah tried to remain polite and friendly, despite her disappointment. They ordered drinks and started chatting, but the conversation quickly turned uncomfortable. David seemed to have a lot of anger towards women, and made several comments that made Sarah feel uneasy. She tried to steer the conversation towards other topics, but he kept bringing it back to his bitterness towards his ex-girlfriend. As the night went on, David became increasingly aggressive. He started making inappropriate comments and touching Sarah without her consent. She tried to leave the bar, but he grabbed her arm and pulled her back to the table. Sarah started to panic. She knew she needed to get out of there as soon as possible, but she didn't know how. She tried to think of an excuse to leave, but David wasn't letting her go. Finally, Sarah saw her chance. David got up to go to the bathroom, and she quickly grabbed her purse and headed towards the door. She was almost out when she felt a hand grab her from behind. It was David. He had caught up to her and was now blocking her path. He had a crazed look in his eyes, and Sarah knew she was in serious trouble. She tried to push past him, but he was too strong. He grabbed her by the hair and pulled her close to him, his hot breath on her face. "Where do you think you're going?" he sneered. Sarah's heart was racing. She didn't know what to do. Then she remembered her pepper spray. She always kept it in her purse, just in case. She reached for it, but David saw her move and snatched it out of her hand. "Now you're in trouble," he growled, before spraying her in the face with her own pepper spray. Sarah was blinded and disoriented. She stumbled backwards, trying to get away from David. She could hear him laughing as he closed in on her. It was a fight for survival. Sarah knew she needed to act fast if she was going to make it out alive. She kicked and thrashed, trying to get away from him. Finally, she managed to break free and ran towards the door. David chased after her, but Sarah was faster. She burst out of the bar and into the street, where she saw a police car driving by. She flagged it down and told the officers what had happened. David was arrested that night and charged with assault. It was later revealed that he had a history of violent behavior towards women. Sarah was lucky to have escaped with her life, but the experience left her shaken and traumatized. From that day on, she swore off dating apps and vowed to always trust her instincts. She knew she had narrowly escaped a deadly situation, and she was grateful to be alive. But the memory of that terrifying night would haunt her for years to come. It was a warm summer night, and Emily was feeling excited. She had matched with a guy named Jack on Tinder a few days ago, and they had been chatting nonstop ever since. Jack seemed like the perfect guy. He was funny, charming, and had a great smile. Emily couldn't wait to finally meet him in person. They had arranged to meet at a small bar in the city center, and Emily arrived a few minutes early. She took a seat at the bar and ordered a drink, feeling nervous but also excited. She kept checking her phone, hoping to see a message from Jack telling her he was on his way. After a few minutes, a man walked into the bar and looked around. Emily's heart skipped a beat when she saw him. He was tall, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. He walked over to her and introduced himself as Jack. They started talking and everything was going great. Jack was even more charming in person than he had been over text, and Emily found herself laughing at all of his jokes. They ordered another round of drinks, and Jack suggested they go for a walk around the city. Emily agreed, and they left the bar and started walking down the street. But as they walked, Emily began to feel a sense of unease. She couldn't put her finger on what it was, but something about Jack was making her feel uncomfortable. They walked for a few blocks until they came to a dark alleyway. Jack suggested they take a shortcut through the alley, but Emily hesitated. She didn't like the look of the alley. It was dark and creepy, with graffiti on the walls. But Jack insisted, so Emily reluctantly followed him down the alley. As they walked, Emily felt her heart racing. She was scared, but she didn't want to show it. Suddenly, Jack stopped and turned around to face her. His eyes were cold and calculating. "I'm not who you think I am," he said in a low voice. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She tried to step back, but Jack grabbed her by the arm and pulled her towards him. "Let go of me!" Emily screamed, but Jack was too strong. He pushed her up against the wall of the alley and started to kiss her forcefully. Emily struggled and tried to push him away, but he was too strong. Just when she thought things couldn't get any worse, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. Footsteps coming towards them from the other end of the alley. Jack seemed to hear it too, because he let go of Emily and backed away. Emily tried to run, but her legs felt like lead. She stumbled and fell, hitting her head on the pavement. When she opened her eyes, she saw two figures standing over her. One was Jack, and the other was a man she didn't recognize. They were talking in hushed tones, but Emily couldn't make out what they were saying. Suddenly, the man pulled out a knife and pointed it at Emily. "Please don't hurt me," she whimpered, tears streaming down her face. But the man just laughed and lunged towards her with the knife. Emily closed her eyes and waited for the worst. But then she heard another sound. The sound of police sirens coming closer and closer. The two men fled, leaving Emily alone in the alley. She lay there for what felt like hours, too scared to move. When the police finally arrived, she was taken to the hospital and treated for her injuries. She never saw Jack or the other man again, but the memory of that night haunted her for years. She deleted her Tinder account and never went on another online date again. The horror of that night stayed with her forever.